Hello. Good morning. Hello, 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 hello. A little bit too much fun at the saloon last night, so I'll be sitting down for a little bit. We'll see if my legs get better. So I wanted to start off a little bit about, we're going to talk about process today, and it's this one thing that I think a lot of us just don't want to share with each other. We feel like it's kind of like something we want to keep close to our chest that we don't want other people to know because they might be our competition or whatever. And so one of the realities, though, is that this is something that we need to share. So I want to tell you a little about who I am and how I got here and why we're talking about process today. I started out like most of you. I was originally a developer and a designer, and then I actually decided I wanted to learn a little bit about the entire creative studio. I wanted to learn about how do you manage a project, how do you do new business, how do you go ahead and actually manage a whole team. And so, you know, right out of college, got a great job on Lake Ontario over in Oswego, New York, which is the exact opposite of Kingston, Ontario. And so, you know, I worked at a startup, and it was great, and then I got laid off 1 year later, after being exactly 1 year later after graduating from college. And so I realized, oh shit, I got to kind of pay attention to what's going on. You know, it's great to do design, it's great to sit there and do code, but at the same time, like, I need to know what's going on in our studio. I need to know, you know, how do we work as a team? You know, what's my role? What are the things that I'm expected to do on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, that type of scenario. So my fiance, now my wife, and I moved to New York City, right outside of there in Westchester County, and I started taking all these different jobs at different studios in New York. And with the specific intention to learn all these different kind of roles, to learn like how to be a project manager, to learn how to be a better web designer, and really understand the processes and of what I liked and what I didn't like, and with the intention that I knew someday I would create my own studio, which is Mark and Phil. So I worked with some great places. Chopping Block, most known for their work with Fish and They Might Be Giants and other types of rock bands like that. Cuban Council, most known for the Facebook logo, literally, and the old design hangout, K10K and stuff like that back in the day. The School of Visual Arts actually taught a class there called Business of Studio, and what that enabled me to do is really understand a bit about the process of curriculums and the process of how we work with people coming in that don't know anything, you know, students that literally don't know this information yet. And the Barbarian Group, most known for the Subservient Chicken. The guy in a chicken suit, and you tell him what to do, and he would do it and run around and stuff like that. I worked at a total of 17 studios altogether. I didn't get fired from any of them. It was literally from, you know, making transitions, wanting to learn all these things, wanting to see how different studios operated, also wanting to just get a good sense of like what different types of teams there are out there. You know, the personalities, the people that you come in contact with. And after all that time, I got laid off in 2009, 2010, and said to my wife, you know, I think it's time. Let's make our own studio. Let's do our own thing. And so we've been doing Mark and Phil, which stands for Marketing and Philanthropy, since 2010. Our primary business has been nonprofits for the most part, and social innovation groups and things like that. And the things I'm going to show you today are actual things that we use there. They're also actual things that I've learned through just research at SVA, and they're actual processes from a bunch of these different studios that really use these things. I've only taken the good things. I've weeded out the bad things that just didn't work and didn't make sense. And then we also have just a few tips to check out as far as how you can implement the process and work on this yourself. So what's the problem? Well, it kind of looks like this. You know, when we start the creative process, and tell me, who hasn't been in fuck off before? Because that happens to me every time. The reality is, you know, when we're doing new business, when we do sales, when you get that new project and someone says, I'm going to give you money for your idea and I want you to do something cool with it, that is the best feeling ever. And then you sit down with your team, you start thinking of ideas, and then it comes to you and you say, oh shit. What are we going to do? How are we going to do this? How are we going to get it done in time? Or what if someone's sick? Or whatever the other stuff might be. This is normal. We all go through this. Doesn't matter if the team is, someone from a giant ad agency that's incredibly successful. Doesn't matter if it's, a small freelance team. We all go through the same anxieties when we get into this stuff. So the reality is, when we look at a project and we look at a team, it kind of ends up like this in the whole process. The client tells us one thing. They specifically tell us they want a three-seated slide on a tree, and it goes all the way through to realize they just wanted a freaking tire swing. The reality is the communication gap is how this all happens. This is why we have these issues. So by using a process, by putting things in place that way, we can actually, subdue some of these problems that actually come up. I love the eye swing, by the way. That's my favorite. So when you're small, a process can live in your head. How many people have done that? How many people have worked with someone else and you just taught them the process from your head? You're just like, hey, this is how we do it. This is, how you make a banner. This is how you make a pop-up window or whatever. But the problem is, how do you translate that to 10, 20, 50, 100 people? How do you make that on a larger scale so that every time someone new comes on the team or comes into the business, you don't have to keep doing that? Doesn't mean you won't actually sit down with someone and give them, individual time and go over what they're doing and explain how to do specific things here and there. But for the most part, the process helps us set that up so that they can understand the full scope of everything they're dealing with. What are their roles? What are their obligations that they need to be fulfilling on the team? If you're running the business or team, you can't keep the process in your head. It just cannot happen. How many folks have been like that on a team? That you start getting frustrated that, your other team members don't know how to do that stuff. There's got to be more hands. Yeah. Because the reality is, you get stressed. You have your own shit to do. You have your own work to do and get done. And then people are telling you, well, I don't know how to do that yet. Can you show me that? And then you realize, oh, crap, I have to sit down and do this for the next hour, 3 hours, or 2 days, whatever the case may be. It has to happen. But it doesn't always have to happen, that unsuccessfully. So why follow a process in the first place? What is it going to do? How's it going to help us? What's the role of it? The key thing is it's going to help define the roles of our team. So, I come from the web world, so on our teams we have typically, a producer, we have a designer, we have a UX person, we have a developer, which is basically front-end developer and a back-end developer, and we'll have a content strategist. All those people used to be one person, and that was me. That was my head. That was me starting out as the freelancer, building this business, and literally doing all those roles and sales and marketing. Thank God my wife, my partner, actually does the books and all the finances and stuff, so we're cool that way. But the reality is, it helps us define who those roles are on the team. It's also going to help us define what's expected of each role. What do we need them to do? Is the producer supposed to also go in and do some light HTML editing or something? Is the designer supposed to use a specific framework, like the Twitter Bootstrap framework or something like that, to build their designs from so that the developer can work with it easier? It's also going to help us define how the work gets done in the first place. Imagine this. When you first started out in your career, you got one of your first projects that you ever got on. Remember back to when you're sitting down and, someone, maybe an art director, creative director, maybe you're learning it on your own, someone kind of showed you the ropes and said, well, this is how we do a project. We start with doing X, a discovery phase or something. Then we do maybe a design phase. Then we do maybe a build phase. And then maybe do the deployment phase. All that has to be defined. People coming in don't know that off the bat. We can make assumptions. We could figure that's the way things are going to be. But the reality is we need to define these things. It's also going to help us develop a really great work ethic. Specifically, if we know what needs to get done, at the end of the day, it's going to make us really happy to succeed, to accomplish those tasks, to get those things done. It's going to help increase morale that way. How good does your team feel when they ship something? I know for us, if we ship something on time or lately we've been trying to do ahead of time, we're going out and having beers. We're having a good time. We're very excited about what's going on. But when things, don't go out on time because the process failed, we're struggling, trying to get it together as a team, completely stressed. It's also going to help establish a culture. What's the culture that's defined in your business? And that might be, that you have unlimited drinks and snacks or something to make it easier for people to get their caffeine fix and stuff. It might be that you have a pool table for people to, relax and de-stress in between different tasks or something. These are all parts of the process. They're all things you're going to need to think about. And the most important part, it's going to keep you dry. You guys know what I mean? It's going to keep you from repeating yourself. Dry literally means don't repeat yourself. And the reality is that too often, we'll find ourselves doing that. When you find yourself sitting down for your next project, and you sit down and you start doing something, I don't mean coming up with the concept or things like that. You shouldn't sell the same idea to everybody. But when you're sitting down, you're thinking about, I have to take the brushes over here, put them into my Photoshop canvas over here. I need to, export this thing from this computer over to this computer. Those are things where you're repeating yourself. Find a better process. Find a way to simplify it. Find a way to make it easier to work with in the long run. So the beauty of this, and I'm not going to leave you hanging, the beauty of this is that we can learn from other industries. This has already been done. They've already gone through this. The biggest one, the example that I've heard the most, is the medical profession. So I think it was the 1900s, it might have been it was the 1900s, might have been even the 1800s. Doctors were having a terrible issue of killing people. From infection, from leaving scalpels in people, from, not stitching people up correctly or not stitching them up at all. And so what started happening was, these doctors are realizing what's going on, and they're saying, there's got to be a better way. We've got to figure it out. It's like the infomercials. There's got to be a better way. The reality is, what they realized was that they weren't even paying attention to what they were doing. They didn't have a checklist. They didn't have anything that told them basically how to get these things done. And so that's exactly what went and happened. A few different doctors actually devised this method of just using checklists. Literally, checklists. So when you go in to get a surgery, when you go in and someone takes your appendix out, they go through the checklist of, did we disinfect the area? Check. Did we make the incision? Check. Did we take out the appendix? Check. Did we take out the scalpel from inside your body? Check. These are the things they're doing to make sure that you're okay. The great thing about it is that, medicine has proceeded very well and we don't have those issues anymore. But the reality is that type of thinking is exactly what we can use. That type of thinking of, looking at the process as almost like a checklist sometimes. And I don't mean we have to micromanage people at all. But it's more so that we make these processes and put them in place so that people can actually use them. So where do we start? I've seen people start at a few different places. I've seen people freak out too late, when the project's due, in the next week and you're realizing, oh crap, we don't have a process to make this happen, to pull this off. But the reality is start doing it now. Start with doing a few bitch sessions, as I call them. Literally, get some six-packs or get some, beer or soda, whatever you want to do. Gather the team and actually sit down and think about these things. Think about, first, what are the main things that are ailing you? What are the problems that you're having? Don't do it all in the same week because it's going to get people really pissed off and you're not going to have enough time to get through it all. But for this first session, go ahead and write down everything that's going wrong. Literally, just a giant list of everything that's going wrong. Don't talk about what's going right. Get it out of the way. Rip off the Band-Aid. Just do it now. Start with that. And your list is probably going to be pretty long, and you're going to be surprised at all the things that people will say. You're going to want to include, if you could include specific team members that have had gripes in the past, that's the best. If you could include the folks that usually don't speak up, that's also really key, because it's those ones that actually just don't feel they can share to you. They don't feel that they can trust you. It's basically that type of thinking that you need to get these people to go ahead and open up to you. Session number 2, write down everything that's going right. Write down literally what are the things that are working out well. Don't think about the things that are going wrong at this point. And so what you should get is a nice list of, the key things that are going right, and you'll have a hard time thinking of some of them, but if you start really breaking it down, you'll get to it. And then that third session, now that you've dealt with all the other crap, write down everything you'd like to see working better. And it's really thinking about, in a perfect world, we should be doing X. In a perfect world, we should be using Grunt and SAS and doing all these things to make our development quicker and easier. Are we? But should we? Yes, we should do it to speed it up. The next thing to look at is planning the process. So document everything that you can and edit the shit later. Literally, document it all so that you just have all these things ready to pull from. Include the input of the whole team. One of the things that I always kind of like to say is to be able to literally just have anyone on the team speak their mind. So that could be making these wiki documents or putting them on Google Docs or something like that. Define some of those tools, but give them some freedom. And what I mean is something like this. So this is an example from one of our processes. This is about communication. So, for instance, we make everyone use Gmail. We make them use Google Hangouts. That's how we talk to each other all day. We make them use Google Drive. That's where we put our files and stuff like that. But at the same time, we let them use Dropbox if they wanted to for their personal files to share between home or something. Or we let them put their personal email accounts onto our Gmail accounts if they wanted to, things like that. We're designating some tools, but also giving them some freedom to use those tools in different ways. Designate a process leader. This person's going to basically be the steward of the process, and it should not be you. Chances are, if you're here in this room to see this talk, you're very passionate about process, or you're very passionate about shit going wrong in your studio. So the reality is you could probably be that leader, but you might be a little too passionate and get too involved. So think about who's that person on your team that's kind of the level-headed person that can go both ways and kind of act as a mediator in a way. On our team, it's this guy, and that's not me. It almost looks like a little kid shot with a beard. That's Clay. So Clay is our director of production. He loves process. Process to him is porn. It literally is. Just loves collecting different things about process. So one of the great things about it is that as we're going through the week, as we're doing something, whether it's coding, whether it's designing, or whether it's building a site, he's actually looking at, okay, are we following some things in the process? If we're not, why? And not freaking out on people. But instead, he's, making notes, saying, oh, we didn't do this and this one, so maybe we should think about doing that in the future. And it's not something he's going to bring up to them, on our team like the next day or something. It's something he's going to make a note of to bring up next time we review the process, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Like I said before, write it all in a wiki or Google Docs or something like that. Our processes start like this. So literally, step 1, step 2, step 3. This is the process of content migration from one site to another. Just explaining it to the folks on the team, giving them real links to things, spelling it out. Here's the crazy thing. Most of us think process and we think of stereo manuals. We think of really bland, crappy, process documents. But the reality is this should be a conversation. These should be pieces that you're putting in there that literally you're talking as if you were sitting down with the person and talking to them directly. That's what this should be like. And that's how we word everything through here. You'll find a lot of the different shops, like when I was at Barbarian Group specifically, literally all they're writing internally on their intranet is as if you're sitting down with Rick Webb, their COO. It's as if you're sitting down having a beer with him, and he's just talking to you straight and telling you how it is. Also make, for easier documentation, make yourself a quick little template. So, this is how we need to make these process documents in the first place. These are the things we need to write down there. And define the checklists, when they're appropriate. And what I mean by that is don't checklist everything. When we're going through the act of something like a design or a build or something, those things make sense to checklist. Those things make sense to say, did we do quality assurance? Did we, check out the code? Did we, put it into Git? All that kind of stuff. But when you're coming up with ideas, who wants a checklist? You know, to say you need to sit in the boardroom, you need to write on the whiteboard, you need to do this other thing. You know, the reality is we need to give people some of that freedom. This is a checklist, and I actually got this from Barbarian Group back in the day. We used this for us. A checklist of the sales cycle. Literally, just from start to finish, thinking about, you know, how do we follow up with a client after they've contacted us? You know, when do we make an actual proposal? Where do we actually store files? Things like that. The beauty of it, and the way we've set this up actually, is that in our main site, we're actually launching a new site. In the new site, we have a CRM running, and that CRM spits this out to, it's called Zapier, which is an automation web app, and then spits it into Trello for us. So we don't have to remake this every time. Instead, every time a lead comes in through someone contacting us through the website, it goes to Zapier, boom, goes to this, boom, and notifies Sabrina, who's in charge of new business. You know, it's about taking those processes and just making them easier to do. And that literally only took us, I think it was 20 minutes to set up that way. Very, very cool tool. Another key thing is to use video. You know, literally sit down, use video, and show people how to work with something. For instance, let me see. Here's a little video that Clay made about how to work with Trello. Now, videos usually suck. So Clay puts them to music and messes around with the cursor. You'll see the cursor bob up and down and stuff. So if you're a new employee, you're either coming into this like, what the F? Or you're having a good time. You know, next door, they're like, what the hell is going on? So, I mean, the reality is make it fun, right? We don't have to make this to be something that's really stuffy and a pain in the ass to do. So what processes should you define? You know, what should you actually sit down and figure out? You know, I'd be willing to show you our entire process documentation if you want to do that or something. But it really breaks down to these key things, and you need to put them in your own words. The first major thing is the production process. You know, how do you actually produce your work? You know, when I mean produce, I mean, you know, if you're designing something, what tools are you using? Are you using Photoshop? Are you using Sketch? You know, are you drawing on paper? Like defining those things. You know, this is what we do. For us, you know, we start with a user interface kit. That user interface kit then goes with a wireframe. The user interface kit and the wireframe both work off of Twitter Bootstrap. And Twitter Bootstrap, the developer takes it and actually builds something. You know, that's what I mean by defining the production process. What's the creative process? And here I'm more talking about ideas. You know, how are you coming up with these ideas? It's important that, you know, you may think that you're just building something or designing something, but in reality, you're really being paid for your ideas, whether you know it or not, or whether you think you're coming up with ideas or not. That's what you're being paid for. So how do you come up with these ideas? You know, how do you guys get into the mode of you know, God forbid, brainstorming or anything like that? There's a million other ways to come up with ideas rather than just a brainstorm. So defining that, you know, looking at different possible ways. A great place to actually see a lot of that stuff is on the Behance blog. You ever been to Behance? I'm sure you've seen people's portfolios there. They're always having things about ideation and how people come up with ideas in the first place. You just should define your technology process. You know, what kind of computers are you using? What kind of software are you using? How often are you updating stuff? You know, how often are you dealing with security and things like that? You should also define your client services process. So specifically, you know, how do you work with clients? And if you're on a team, you know, your clients are internally. So how do you work with the other departments? You know, if someone from another department comes over to get you to do something, how do you actually deal with that? You know, how do you talk to them? How do you get things done for them in the first place? Also define the leadership and management process. Being a boss isn't always what it's cracked up to be. There's a lot of thinking that goes behind it. You have to be a leader. You have to actually think about how to manage people. One of the kind of beautiful things about it is that you need to really think about how people interact with each other. I can't remember whose presentation it was yesterday, but one of the B-sides over there, and they were talking about swearing, and it's so true. It's so true. Swearing in your office, swearing and having it going there. Having it going is absolutely true. That it breaks down the barriers. It breaks down this manager-employee relationship, and actually gets people to give a shit, to pay attention. The other thing it does is it makes people feel level. It literally makes them feel like they're on the same level with you. Imagine that. Imagine the first time you heard your parents swear. And you're like, oh shit. Or when they let you swear in front of them. Even better. And then you're like, well, I'm one of them now. I'm an adult. That's the same thing here. Management, and I'm not going to get off on a tangent, but maybe I will. Management is very much like parent-child relationship. And, stop me at one of the parties tonight or tomorrow and I'll tell you more. But it's very much like a parent-child relationship and how everything works. So define that. How are you going to lead, or how are, the leaders in your organization going to be doing this? Human resources. You got to define these things, vacation time, sick days. We do a work from home policy. We're only in the office Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Tuesday, Thursday, everyone works from wherever they want to. Could be home, could be Antarctica, as long as they have an internet connection. Could be anywhere. But the reason that we do that is because we want our employees to have a little bit of freedom, have that kind of alone time to be able to think correctly and not have people bothering them all day necessarily from the team. The marketing process. So, how are you marketing the work you're doing? As a business, this is super important. Even more so if you're just a team inside of a business. This is also important. How does everyone else in the entire company know what the hell you guys do? Besides think that you make things that look pretty. New business and sales process, you definitely need to define that, like the example I was showing you there. One of the biggest things about that is just really making sure that you're not dropping the leads that are coming in. You're not dropping, the communication with people. That's almost the number one factor that people just don't actually get new businesses because they don't follow up on it. They just don't pay attention. And the last one is your finance process. So, how do you come up with the numbers? How much is your time worth? How much is XYZ project worth? These are things that we need to actually assess and look at closer. All right. So some of the things I wanted to show you here was specifically about sharing the process. And I think it's really important because this is not meant to live in a vacuum. This is not meant to be something that we create and then we tuck close to our chests and don't, use it. Don't share it with our clients and with our team and stuff like that. One of the key things you can do, which is really, really simple, is go ahead and internally build an intranet. Use WordPress, for God's sakes. Use Tumblr. I don't care. Password protect a Tumblr and do it there. Use Google Sites, if it still exists. But, stuff like that. Like, literally just take the time to take all those documents that you put together and sit down and do it. This is our intranet here. We call it Guts. You'll see the little unicorn over there throwing up a rainbow. And so what we literally do, this is about our core values here, what we literally do is we give everyone in the office, everyone in our company, all the information they possibly need to be able to get their job done. Everything from, IT, like, how do you set up Vagrant on your computer, to, when do you get vacations? That type of thing. Another key thing to do is externally build a client portal. How many people have a place where your clients log into to see the progress on a project? Okay. How many are using Basecamp? Okay. I'm saying something other than Basecamp. So make it pretty, make it nice, make it something they're going to want to actually go to, not something that's just like, oh, we made this thing, here you go. So these are we call it the hub. There it goes again. And so we actually show as like a status report. So the project manager, the producer on the project will go in and actually say something like, hey, today we did this thing, this process, and here's a link to it. Or, here's a link to the live build. Or here's an example of the design. And actually gives it to them to show. This is all password protected, by the way, too. So it's not like, we're just leaving it out there for Google to find. But the reality is, we give them that capability to be able to see all these things. We also talk about things like the team. How many people think that their clients know everyone that's on your team or know their faces? Probably not a lot. The reality is usually the only people that actually meet the client are the people in charge. They barely ever meet the folks that are actually producing work. So this gives them a chance to make that connection, to see someone like, Erica or Clay or Vin or whoever that are on our team that are actually doing stuff and getting things done for them. Have a new employee orientation process. Super important. So when, new people come into your team or into your business, you have to have some way for them to know what to do, what's expected of them, how they're going to get their work done, what your company's all about, what are your values for your team. For us, we have this is the part-time employee orientation. We have a full-time one too. And it literally just goes through those things, gives them a bunch of links. This is their first task, the first day. They have 3 things to do. One is send out an email to everyone in the company with an embarrassing picture. 2 is say hello to everyone, like actually meet everyone that's on the teams. And 3 is to go through this and read the directions. And we fired people who went through and just couldn't read the directions. And it's not learning disorder or anything like that. It's just they just wanted to skip through it and get right to the stuff. But that's not how it goes. We need to all acknowledge and see what the processes are. I'm not saying they need to sit down and memorize this in the first day. That's not what it's about. The intention is for them to go to it, click open the links, read some of the stuff, and see where the information is. To see that it's available. To see, the things that'll stick in their heads. To really get a sense of, like, what are our core values in the first place. One of our major values is to be honest. We don't lie to each other internally. There's no lying at all. We don't tolerate it. We don't do it. Because we're supposed to be, working together in a trench, basically, getting stuff done. So those are some great examples of just kind of how you can share. Again, all these really quick to put together. And I mean, keep it as simple as possible. If you're not a crazy programmer, make a password-protected Tumblr. Seriously. So once we have the process in place, once we have these things like sharing, how do we evolve that process? How do we go to the next step? One of the key things to think about is really just editing. This isn't something that you guys made and you leave it there and just sit it and don't mess with it. This is something that you need to keep evolving over time. Sometimes you might notice that you'll need to edit a document, you made one and then you realize the next week that the process you put in place doesn't work. No one likes it. No one will follow it. Maybe it's just shitty. But the reality is you have to have the capability to go in there, edit it, and say, you know what, guys, let's reassess this. How should we do this now instead? Don't worry about the naysayers. Again, as we're evolving, don't worry about the naysayers, but listen to the moans and groans. A great point is at one shop I was at, they had an internal tool that we were using for new business, and specifically every single time any one of us on new business and sales would go through this whole systems checklist, and we always skipped 2 parts in it. Every single one of us, every single time. And it wasn't because we didn't want to do it. It wasn't because we were being lazy. It was just because it was broken. That part of the process didn't work. We just couldn't do it that way. We just couldn't, do that check mark because it didn't make sense with the flow of how everything was getting done. And so we had to adapt and change that. Make it a point to, no matter what, review every 6 months. This is going to keep you honest to yourself. Make it a point to look at this stuff. Sit down, go through it, and look at it. And say, okay, is this making sense? Are these still our values? Is this still how we should be doing design in the first place? And then every 5 years, fuck it all, get rid of it, and start over. And the reality is, all the good things will come back in. All the bad things, the fluff, the bureaucracy bullshit that was in there will go away. and then you realize you don't need those things. So it's really, focusing on how do we simplify that every 5 years. And I'm dead serious about this. Get rid of it. Because what will end up happening is that if you just keep using the same thing over and over and over again over a period of time, Sean's talk, he talked about this, and Jason White talked about it too yesterday, was that if we get too stuck in the same process, the same applications, the same way we do production, that we never evolve. We don't evolve as a company, we don't evolve as a team, we don't evolve as individuals. And if we're not doing that, then guess what happens? Those are dinosaurs. That's literally what happens. You become a dinosaur in the industry. You're not evolving forward. So every 5 years, trash it. Now, go do it. It's important. It's important to actually start these steps. While you're here, you're going to lunch soon. At lunch, sit down, write down just a bullet list of what's the shit that's bothering you with your process. Choose one process. Maybe it's sales, maybe it's production, maybe it's creative process. What are the things that are ailing you? How are you going to do it? Who can you get on your team that can help you out, that you can pull in to be a champion of this and really tackle it? This is a great picture. This is Dat Fan. I don't remember Last Comic Standing. It was an American show. Essentially, Last Comic Standing, they got all these comedians together. They put them in a house like The Real World or some shit. And they basically have them, tell jokes to audiences. People get kicked off, voted off and stuff like that. Dat Fan was, I think he was a Laotian immigrant in America, came over. I think he was the first generation in America from his parents. And so he could speak English perfectly fine. But the other comedians on the team were always just kind of making fun of him, that his jokes didn't make sense, whatever. And they realized that what he was also doing is he was keeping charts and graphs, these little charts and graphs. So he would go out, tell the jokes, he'd come back, and he would pull out these charts and graphs and write stuff down. And they didn't really divulge what the hell those were on the show until about the second to last episode. And he talks about it, and he says, well, you guys want to make fun of the charts? Whatever, What you don't realize is I go out there, I tell a joke, and as the joke goes, I count in my head. And he's counting the number of seconds people are laughing. And what he did was he would come back, he had a chart of all his jokes, he'd write down the numbers, and he kept mixing up his jokes so that he was basically keeping people laughing the whole entire time. So that he was pulling out the ones that were shitty, putting in the ones that made sense. And that's exactly what you need to do here. You need to count your progress on what works in your process, what doesn't. Remove the crap, keep the good. Here's some great books that you actually should check out. Absolutely buy them. They're all, less than $20. The Checklist Manifesto talks about all that stuff I was talking about with the medical profession. Agency, this is actually done by Rick Webb of the Barbarian Group. It just came out, and I'm only halfway through it, and it's profound. I actually got my slides done, and I was reading the book, and I got to his chapter on process and realized, holy shit, the things I'm talking about to you today were in my slides and are in his book. So it's really pretty interesting to see the commonality of all the things that I'm using today that I was influenced from them on. And the E-Myth. The E-Myth is super important. So the E-Myth really is about being an entrepreneur. It's really about how do we set something up to allow other people to succeed in our team. How do we take processes, how do we take all these things that we want to accomplish and teach other people to be able to do that. That's my main stuff, guys. I'm happy to answer questions. I'm also happy to see you guys anytime, any of these evenings. Just tap me and drag me over, and I'll answer your questions then. But if you want to email me or Twitter, there you go. Oh, thank you. All right. No questions. Stop me sometime. Thanks a lot.